Okay, it's taking a slide. Okay, we'll be live after this countdown. Okay, good to go now, Nalanda.
Welcome,
I'm
welcome.
sorry, we got 10 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're good now.
Mine says
Welcome.
44.
Welcome. We're so happy to be here with you today. We are so excited. It's been a while, but we always enjoy being here on Creating Zola Mondays and see if we can create a little Zola. We have a special guest with us today who's going to share with us her work, her research on a very exciting topic that I think you'll find very interesting. I am Linda James Myers, moderator of Creating Zola Mondays, and I'm going to have the rest of the panelists introduce themselves, but I'm also going to have, I want to say Dr. Rivas, but Brenda Rivas introduce herself as well so she can let us know what she'd like us to know about her. Why don't we start with our elder and then we'll go around the circle.
Y'all just be picking on the old people, huh?
Elder abuse.
My name is Harvey Linder. I'm a clinical psychologist. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I've been active in ABSI for many, many years, and I've done several things, including being a regional rep, and I'm currently a member of the ethics committee, and a friend of mine and I helped us start a chapter in Minnesota. So that's enough for me. Jojo, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Dr. Jodisha Hickson. I am the chair of the DC Association of Black Psychologists, National ABSI Public Relations, and a school psychologist in Washington, D.C. So I'm really excited about this conversation. I do tarot myself. I'm not as good as Brenda because I don't have a good memory, but that's why I'm excited to learn. So I'll go ahead and pass to Colin, and then last but not least, our esteemed guest.
Good afternoon, good people. My name is Colin Bird. I am a grad student in counseling at Bowie State University. I'm also a member of our DC ABSI chapter, which Dr. Hickson leads, and I have a background in public administration.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And now we'll hear from our esteemed guest.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much. I'm excited to even be in this space. My name is Brenda Rivas. I am a licensed clinical social worker, not doctor yet. Everyone is telling me that it must happen, so we'll see what the future holds. But some things about me: I am the director and founder of a mental health therapy practice located in Chicago. It's hybrid. We do in-person and virtual work. Our focus is predominantly on the mental health concerns of Black and Brown individuals, especially emerging adulthood. So that's 18 to 29. And for me specifically, my work has developed in the direction of decolonizing our mental health and our wellness. And that means finding new routes to ancestral wisdom. So what I'm here to talk about today is actually how I have cultivated that skill over the last few years through the use of tarot, divination, and spirituality in my clinical work. So I'll be talking about what I do, why I do it, how I do it, and a little bit about how it looks actually in a clinical session. So I have been a therapist for, goodness, almost 11 years. It's always a surprise to me too when I say that. And I love what I do, and I am especially grateful for ABSI for continuing to support my work, but beyond that, really just expanding my understanding of what healing looks like for us and what is possible for us.
Excellent. Well, we're so happy to have you because we know divination is an essential part of our cultural heritage, going way back to the ancient wisdom tradition of African deep thought. And so when people think about divination, they think about particular indigenous ethnic groups in Africa who still practice, but they oftentimes don't think about We in the Americas who have been transported here and had to go within and bring forward those cultural understandings that have not left us. So I'm excited to hear more about the work that you do. I really love the way you talk about decolonizing the tradition, because certainly we have been colonized to see the world the way our ancestors' captors saw it, and it doesn't work for us. So particularly if we're interested in good mental health. So with that in mind, can you share a bit about what your reaction has been, or people's reaction has been, to your introducing tarot
Yes.
cards?
Absolutely. I would say that it has been a pleasant surprise that there has been such a positive reaction. When I think about it in my clinical work, especially, what tends to stand out to me is that it's not something that I lead with. It's actually something that I find clients that we've done a lot of evidence-based clinical work. We've really started to remove some of those barriers to their own understanding of themselves, and they start to feel their own pull towards something deeper, something more meaningful. And this is very specifically for my Black clients, and most often my Black women clients, and some of my Black queer clients. And many of them grew up in some sort of faith tradition. So I did as well. I grew up Southern Baptist. I grew up Pentecostal, Kojic. That's Church of God in Christ, for those who don't know, which means that you can wear pants if you want, but you probably shouldn't. It was that kind of space. So for me to be so deeply entrenched in that, and then to work with clients who have a sense of some sort of orientation to something greater, but still want more, is really what moved me into divination and moved me into understanding our practices, ancestral practices, and African-centered religion, spirituality, and healing work.
Excellent. How do you ground that then in the African tradition? I know divination overall certainly is a main segue, but I'm also thinking about the process itself of a deck of cards, certain cards emerge. And I wanted to get your thoughts about my own notions relative to that, which is one of our earliest sages of written record, Tahuti, who others called Thoth or Hermes, had a law. He said, chance is a law unrecognized. So that divination in its own right becomes not something of chance, but if you don't understand it or can't explain it, there is a law, often unrecognized, that is guiding that. And so what I find is that oftentimes people think, oh, that's not really scientific, or that's not, as though your Western therapy is scientific, but that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea that whatever card comes up, oh my goodness, I have workers here who are talking whatever card comes up is somehow by chance is problematic. He's not going to go. Obviously, he's not going to go.
That's the ancestors. They're like,
it is. That was a good question.
This is how we roll.
This is censorship.
Listen, I believe that there are no coincidences, so I'm going to say that first and foremost.
So that wasn't just chance, right?
Never. Apparently not, right? That's what we're coming to learn. I think that is such a good question as well, right? How do we ground really our methods in a system that has actively colonized and criminalized and demonized them? So I think where I go naturally is to thinking about what it means to decolonize the mind and decolonize our practices. And we do have literature, we do have research about how that is a major part of our healing process. And the reasons why some of our healing has been so stagnant and so stunted is because decolonization is constantly being suppressed and oppressed. So when I think about using tarot cards, I actually connect it to what does exist already in the field of psychology. I ground it in things like the Rorschach ink blot test, and I ground it in projective testing, right? The idea that the subconscious or unconscious mind is kind of always seeking the opportunity to reveal itself. And we have been so trained out of hearing that and listening to that. So how do we use images to allow concepts to come more into the present and more into like accessible territory? So when I think about using a tarot card, there's a lot more to it than a card comes out and then we're going to guess together what it means. One thing that I talk about a lot is that you have to have your own grounding and your own relationship to the cards if you're going to use them with clients. Okay. Ethics and integrity matter across the board always. So I can't pull a card and neither of us know what it means, right? I need to be able to have a sense of what this could mean in this particular like scoring system that tarot technically would be. The way that the Rorschach has a scoring system. But what I do and what I call it is decolonized symbolic integration. So this means that for me, what comes out of the cards is my ancestors, your ancestors, our lineages actually speaking and trying to touch base with the part of us that has been holding that wisdom for generations, for lineages, right? It's impossible to imagine that any of us are sitting here right now without there being some sort of higher purpose or journey to continue or work to be done for what we had to go through to even get here. So I see using the cards as particular messages from your lineage, your purpose work, your journey to get you closer to not doing it necessarily, but being able to hear that voice of yourself. It's my way of helping people build trust with the inner knowing, right? I am, as I said, a social worker by trade, by degree. My job has never been to sit in therapy with you for the rest of your life. My job is to help you find the skills and the tools and the internal belief system that you need so that it doesn't have to be my voice in your head at a certain point, and you can recognize what the voice is that's trying to guide you towards your greatest good and your highest bliss.
Absolutely true. Well said.
I find it interesting that you draw that parallel between using the cards and like the things that I used to do using cards. I used, I grew up learning how to give Rorschach tests and score them and interpret them, and how to give the thematic apperception test, which is just, pictures, and people would tell a story and it would reveal something about what was going on in their inner psychic world. And I had not thought of making a connection between my learning how to, to look at, internal personality aspects using those kinds of tools as something that was similar to what you might do with tarot cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's part of what the decolonizing process has been for me, is realizing like I'm not reinventing the wheel, right? So many of us have in some way or other already connected to our ancestral practices. I think about my grandparents, my great grandparents, some of the ways they would use herbs, the gardens they would have. I have a memory of my grandmother. One of my cousins got a bee sting and she grabbed a cigarette, cut it in half, put it on the sting, and it drew the stinger out, right? These are not things that we Google. These are things that are just within us that have been passed on over and over again. And so much of what we learn in the field is grounded in that Eurocentric way of thinking, of feeling, right? Even the Rorschach, and I do this in my presentation, the ink blots are so kind of, they're ambiguous, but they lack a lot, right? They don't feel like personality. And I think some of that is because we want the space to project whatever's coming out. But what is the difference ultimately between a tarot card with lots of imagery and lots of color and just the gray kind of grayscale palette of an ink blot test? And for me, it is that we have lineage behind what we're trying to do, that divination, that understanding messages through things other than language has been a part of our culture forever, right? We've thrown bones. We use cowrie shells. Some of us are root workers. Some of us are herbalists. So there's so many different ways that we already do some version of this work without realizing, right, that we've been naturally drawn to things that were probably connected to our lineage.
Do you find people are surprised at what comes out of them when they look at the tarot cards and then start talking about what it evokes for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of skepticism automatically, right? Because tarot for many of us, like Black Americans especially, has been connected to like demons, right? You're letting certain evil spirits in, and this is not of God or this is not of Christianity. So I think there's an automatic for many of them like hesitation at first to actually just say whatever is coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of the work I do of like grounding and occasionally kind of interrupting what I'm seeing, that hesitance I'm seeing, and encouraging them to just say what comes out is so important. And I think they're surprised by how aligned it actually does feel to what the card means, right? I have clients who've never seen a tarot card before in their life. And when I pull one with them, they really do kind of get very close to meanings and themes that the card actually has.
You know, to me, it seems to have a kinship with the fact that our ancestors used a glyphic language, and that you could have a glyph, and the glyph would mean different things to different people. There were some common meanings, but also those meanings could change as the depth of your knowledge and your exploration of self changed. The meaning of the glyphs would change to you.
Yeah.
I think that's brilliantly said, Dr. Linder. Because, like I said, I do tarot cards, but I don't like. I think I've done it with my clients a few times, but I haven't made it a regular practice, especially in the schools. The baby's not going to understand as much. But when I do it for my friends and family, right, and then other tarot readers will always say, "Take what resonates and leave what doesn't." So exactly what you just said, Dr. Linder, is correct, right? So people will project whatever they're experiencing onto those tarot cards and make meaning from whatever the card's representation might be.
Oftentimes, tarot decks. I'm sorry, Colin, go ahead. You haven't said anything.
Yeah, sure. No, I've been listening, taking it in, and for me, I have a couple of questions, but I want to give some context for where my questions are coming from. And thank you for sharing your insights and experiences on this. Like you, I do have an upbringing that was sort of centered in the Christian faith, for example. So, a lot of my understanding growing up, and even to this day, is kind of, thinking about the different church denominations. You have the AME Church, you have Baptist, you have, Kojic, you mentioned that. And then, of course, within our faith, we have theologians like Dr. Tony Evans that, have written extensively on various theological and historical things related to Black people, religion, all of that, right? So then, against that backdrop, I just get out of ABC a couple of weeks ago, and our president, Dr. Swift Muhammad, put together this, very, very enlightening panel on spirituality, and you had diverse perspectives. You had on one hand, and of course, the conference was about freeing the African spirit. And so she had a representative from her faith, the Nation of Islam. There was Dr. Cambone talking about African spirituality, and she was really encouraging us to think about even the language that we use and how that's been colonized, how we talk about some of these things. And then, of course, Dr. Browder, and he did the Egypt on the Potomac tour. He was talking about Egypt, or what was formerly understood as Kemet. And he was telling this story. I had not heard about Asar and Haru and the links between African religion in Egypt, or spirituality in Egypt, and even DC architecture, right? So it was a lot to take in. And even this is just even more to take in. And then, I'm grounded that against even some of the other things that I hear in ABC, like from Dr. Linda James Myers, who published a great book, which has a devotional, Blessed Assurance. And I'm thinking about my childhood listening to that song by CeCe Winans. That's Christianity. So we got a lot of different things when we start talking about African spirituality and or religion. And as you mentioned, this kind of I would say clashes with a lot of the doctrine that we hear, for example, in Christianity. So my two-part question for you, Ms. Rivas, is one, how did you get from the upbringing that you mentioned to tarot cards? Because that's a lot of Christians would find that to be a quite a leap, right? And then I'm not saying that it is, I'm just saying a lot of them would. And then my second question for you is, I found it very interesting, how you were talking about the ethics of this and how you kind of slow walk this, right? You don't even start your therapy with this, and people haven't experienced it before. So when I took ethics, legal and ethics, everybody was saying, even when you start integrating, more commonly understood expressions of faith like Christianity or Islam, you got to really be careful about when you throw that out there and all of that. So when you mention the EBPs that you use before you get to that point where they're getting a better, like, what are you doing on that front end that gets them to the point where you say, you know what, it's time for me to drop the cards on them. So one, again, how you got here, and then two, how you get them there. Does
Sure.
that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
totally clear. Thank you so much for the question. I think the two live together for me, right? I was not pushed into tarot. I was not encouraged in any way to move into a space of tarot. So for me, growing up in the church was very rooted in my mother. My mom was a devout Christian. I was in church like 3 days a week. I was in the choir. I was on the step team. I did Bible trivia. It was our life. And my mom passed away in 2021. So for me, it was really, and I've been realizing this even about some of my clients who feel drawn to reconsidering religion and reconsidering opening up to more African-centered spirituality. Grief seems to be a portal. And I don't know if it's particularly moms. I don't know if it's that it needs to be that person who's your anchor to the world, because that was definitely my mom. But for me, it was, I don't find the same type of relief or comfort or safety in the church that I think my mom did. And that was always the case, right? It was always hard for me to connect at the same level as she did. So I didn't necessarily start with tarot. I started with wanting to learn more about ancestral practices and other ways of healing, other ways of knowing. And that is what led me to divination. And then tarot cards felt the most accessible. So I have been a writer. I have been a creative. My mom used to paint. So for me, images and ways to put language with images was it felt aligned for me. I also want to name that the first deck that I ever got, actually one of my clients was bringing up their tarot practice. And the conversations we were having about their practice and the ways that it was really opening their eyes, but they were needing more support or more guidance, is what led me to consider tarot. So in that way, it was decolonized in that we were learning and growing with each other. We were healing with each other. So that is where my path kind of diverted from my traditional Christian upbringing to understanding tarot and divination as actually encompassing it. So I want to name that my first deck was the Hoodoo Tarot deck. And in the guidebook are scriptures for each card, as well as the meaning in African psychology or in African divination and spirituality, certain key words. There are certain important characters within Hoodoo and within African traditional spirituality and healing work. So I don't even think of it as necessarily diverging. I think of it as an expansion. And then to your other question, how do I kind of move clients into this space with ethics, with care, with consideration? Very, very carefully. I don't actually bring up that I do tarot cards. I bring up, it sounds like you're interested in exploring something else. What do you already know, right? I trained as a psychodynamic therapist, and I trained very client-centered. I did a 2-year fellowship in the practice of client-centered therapy. And the core understanding there is that the tools and skills that you have are within you. And the more that I create a safe space for you to naturally kind of test that out and your own personality and your own truths out, those things will naturally emerge. So I am not one who's going to give you homework. I'm not very behavioral. I really do feel like the container itself is the healing space. So when they bring it up, I present it automatically as, do you know that there are many versions of this that exist? What would you like to explore? Here are some books. Here are some resources. What is it? What have you already seen in your family? What draws you? What resonates with you? And then I would say, one of the things that I do is that I use tarot cards to kind of bring us closer to that ancestral understanding or to that African-centered spirituality. Is this something you would like to try? And that is how that happens. And I talk about this in my presentation as well, like the ethics and also the importance of understanding that this is spiritual stewardship. My goal is not to make you pull tarot cards. My goal is to guide you closer to whatever your version of spirituality is. So my tarot cards might tell you to go back to church, and that's fine. Like if that's what works for you, then that's now we get to create, SMART goals and those kind of evidence-based clinical language for that in our notes, so that I get to integrate that I'm doing this as well as the evidence-based practices that allow me to make this work accessible.
Can you say more about clinical language and how you incorporate that into like the client's case plan, and how do you document the progress that you're making?
Absolutely. Yeah, so a lot of my clinical notes already center on what are our goals in terms of self-esteem, in terms of managing mood, depression, anxiety, these things that in my frame of reference are barriers to understanding the true self, right? This is what makes you doubt the intuition that you already feel, or this is what has suppressed it entirely so you can't hear it anymore. And you're actually listening to other people's voices or defaulting to other people's ways of thinking about the world. So many of my early sessions—
And this helps them reach within themselves.
Absolutely.
To look for that. Okay.
Many of my sessions might just be about like, let's regulate those emotions. Let's understand what anxiety is. In the clinical language, I will talk about DSM criteria. Does this resonate with you? Are you doing this? Does this make sense to you? And I will document over time a reduction in symptoms. And then that reduction in symptoms is directly connected to what starts to emerge, which is, I think I'm hearing myself more. I'm trusting that I'm hearing myself more. And that is scary because maybe that's not something I've been able to do, or maybe
that's insight.
Absolutely. Right. So I say often in my notes that I'm using insight-oriented talk therapy. I may say that I'm implementing an intervention based in ACT therapy, right? Acceptance and commitment therapy. And then I bring in later that I'm using a projective tool to assist client in revealing unconscious needs, desires, and emotions. That could be a tarot card, right? That we pulled something.
It's a projective tool.
Exactly. Something that's directly connected to their desire for community, like the Three of Cups. And we're talking about that, your desire for community. Okay, now help me understand, what does community mean to you, right? Therapists use solution-oriented talk therapy to create space for client to share more about values, goals, and ideals around community building. And then we use SMART goals to establish certain behavioral activation techniques so that they will go out and do that thing. Right? Tarot itself is not the only intervention. It's the guide to whatever the intervention will lead them towards the action they need in their life.
Fascinating.
Which is similar to divination in almost any cultural frame. So it's quite exciting to hear that you've been able to translate that. I think one of the things that occurs to me just listening to you and also Colin's question is the realization that when you go to the deep structure of culture, and there are certain assumptions there that will then form the surface structure that we can see, like the roots of a tree, and then you can see the blossoming of the tree or whatever. It seems to me that almost all belief systems, spiritual systems that are passed on and effective, and passed on because they are effective, share a similar deep structure. And that's why translation. So, for example, I was raised in the Baptist church, but I knew as a child what the preacher was saying didn't make sense literally, but figuratively, it made sense. And so I translated whatever he said through my own lens, which was, I don't know that Jesus really walked on water, but I think he probably did have the power to transcend a consciousness that allowed him to do miraculous things. So if you, I like the fact you talked about expanding, because I think that's what happens when you open yourself, when you're really grounded at the level of culture, deep structure. It's certainly not something, as you say, you would introduce to the client who hasn't demonstrated they have the capacity as yet. But it's exciting to know that we are decolonizing our processes for healing and health, and that decolonization has led to a reconnection to spirit in a way that we otherwise may not have known.
Mhm.
So thank you.
I have a question for y'all. I actually was with another member of AB Psi this weekend. We had the pleasure of joining the Black Health Connect at their Bridging Healthcare Communities event, and it was really dope. So, anyway, we were talking around um, just some of the ways that we were witnessing people react to gentrifiers in DC. And we had a conversation around impulsivity and intuition. And I argued that what if that's two sides of the same coin and it exists on a spectrum? And the other member was like, no, two things can't exist at once. So I'm wondering how, like, you, Miss Rivas, and you're so brilliant. I love hearing you talk. I'm just so excited. How do you reconcile, right, some of those things that might come up in the occult or spirituality or religion versus that more clinical dogma really that we're trained in, right? So what if sometimes impulsivity is intuition, and how we distinguish that
Yeah,
or discern that?
that's a great question. Well, personally, I will say I think that two things can exist all the time, and they often do. And I struggle even to think in a binary at all most of the time, because so much of what we do and so much of our healing has never existed in that like right, wrong, good, bad kind of space. So when I think about that question in particular, how do we identify what might be spirit talking or your ancestors talking and what might be the wound talking? Like that is the reason for the groundedness of the therapy work, right? At this point, I know my client, right? We have worked a lot already together through their traumas, through the parts of them that are reacting versus actually being able to sit still and understand. And something that I have been working on for some time outside of decolonized symbolic integration is a concept that I call boundaried empathy. And this applies to our clients who have been through things that create like this over empathy or this under empathy. And many times the impulsivity that I've noticed seems to stem from one or the other, the inability to have empathy for self and other in equal measure, right? Either I care too much about you, so I keep sacrificing myself, or I care too much about myself, so I keep sacrificing the other. And a lot of my work has been around helping clients understand that your traumas, your wounds, the spaces that you have been in that encourage you to do one or the other created adaptive skills that don't apply to the life that you want now. So how do we reimagine that you can still have boundaries, you can still have very healthy relationships with yourself and with others, and you can still communicate from a place of your values and your needs, not of guilt, shame, a desire to not be alone, right? Those things that are often behind impulsivity or making choices that are best for ourselves. So understanding my clients at that level and teaching them the skills to practice that boundary empathy helps us both distinguish if what you're hearing might be connected to a wound, might be within a particular context, and not actually coming from, like I said, your greatest good, your highest bliss, what your ancestors, what your spirit guides actually want for you and the direction that they're trying to move you in.
Thank you. I'm gonna just disclose, y'all. We were talking about me. So after the event, I was looking for my friend, and I was shouting, publicly for his name. I was shouting his name, and this white girl was like, she said something to me that I took to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Just nefarious. I didn't like it. I felt like, and I know that like I reacted out of a place of emotional, what is it called, racial trauma, right? Because how are you going to try and tell me not to take up space or look for my friend? And so me and the AB side member were talking about impulsivity and intuition and things like that. And he was saying, which I agree, right, that we have to think about what we have to lose, right? We can't be out here fighting white people in the street, giving our credentials and things like that. And I was just like, I don't know, like maybe it's the racial trauma in me, but I don't want to shrink myself or my experience for this white person who I wasn't even talking to. And so I love that explanation that you just gave. That definitely helps me to reflect on that experience. And if you're taking clients, share your link in the chat for the people in Chicago.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, I totally understand and resonate with what you're saying. I'm just gonna say that. Chicago, we have our issues too, and you can feel it. It's different. I grew up in the South. I want to name that. So I grew up in North Carolina, and that is a very different type of cultural landscape than Chicago, which means a lot of that lives within me while I'm walking the streets of Chicago. So it's very easy to feel very activated, which is how I kind of talk to my clients about it, very activated by what feels like intentional attempts to make you small or to imply that you are not supposed to be here or that you are bothering or you're an inconvenience. And at the same time, like understanding yourself on a deep level is understanding that that is also a part of the colonization of them as well, not just of us, right? That not being able to see us as people is was necessary for the dehumanization that we experienced. And I don't think that it's normal and it's not natural to the human experience as a whole. But that's a tangent that I could definitely go on as well. And I won't. Because I know
Please, I'm gonna call you after this, girl. We're gonna have to chop it up. But that's why I'm grateful for spaces like this, right? Because in the moment I was definitely active. I'm like, we already outside, just step in the street, right, girl? But I'm thankful for spaces like this where we are reminded, right, by elders like Nana Linda James Myers and our co-panelists, that we don't have to let these people take us outside of our bodies.
Yes.
Right. If I'm so grounded in who I am and myself and my values and that knowledge that, right, there are consequences to some actions, then maybe I would have reacted differently. But in that moment, I was ready to fight. So let me, I digress.
Yeah.
And I suspect that wasn't your intuition.
Probably not. That was probably the LIT, the libations.
But it's so important that we bring some of these issues to the fore, because I'm just thinking about how much internalized depression many of us have taken upon ourselves or have been injected in us. And we'd oftentimes do need to create that space where people can kind of unpack some of that and get more in touch with that aspect of themselves that would hear that kind of nonsense than just say,
Right.
We have to be able to support the capacity of people to get in tune with that divine spirit within and within which they are. And so the means by which we can do that, our ancestors certainly left us the roadmap, the blueprint, but how it manifests at this day and time, since we're here at this day and time, is going to be probably not exactly the same. Could be, but doesn't have to be. Or look the same, should I say.
I agree, Nana Linda.
Ms. Rivas, I know that you're also have built a practice with other people, and I assume that you're teaching and training them within the practice. I wonder if you are willing to say a little bit about how you introduce this into like your practice philosophy. This is a clinic where we do all these kinds of things, and how you pass some of that on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all over the website. You cannot get past many pages in our website without seeing the word decolonized healing, without seeing something about spirituality, without seeing something about reconnecting to non-Western healing practices. And sometimes that is part of the draw for clients that come our way. I think the fact that I do emphasize the populations that I do is a big part of that. The website is www.orangetreecounseling.com. And, each of my clinicians on the team, you'll see in their bios, like their own kind of way of orienting to decolonized work, right? One of our therapists also runs a farm. One of our therapists is Latinx, and she brings a lot of her culture into her work. We had an intern who I just hired on, who her parents are both astrologers. So there are so many ways that the way that I choose for who's joining the practice and the way that I encourage them to bring whatever they naturally have to the practice integrates into the core principle of decolonizing healing. What I do with my team is we meet regularly. I have monthly all staff meetings with them, and then I have monthly case consultation meetings with them. And we are pretty much virtual, so we don't have much in-person contact, but in those meetings, I like to do activities. I like to do debriefs. Sometimes I talk about what's been going on in the world, and then I remind them of our values, right? I'll pull up all of the values. I'll go over each one. I will ask, how are you seeing this in our practice? How are you seeing this in our own work? Are you seeing this in your client work? Where do you want to learn more? I did a presentation, the same one that I had given at ABSI virtually. And what I did is share those links with my team, and some of them did attend it. So some of them have seen my presentation, have seen how I do the work, how I explain that work. And I have brought tarot cards and pulled tarot cards with them as well. So I will say I don't necessarily kind of teach this as a framework, like Orange Tree does this. It really is still Brenda does this. And if you're interested, I would love to share more with you. But part of the decolonizing work for me is that I think it's important that many ancestral practices and many types of divination and wisdom come into the work that we do. And I like to create space for my team members to share what they're doing and to share their work.
Earlier on, you talked about the audience that you're attracting are mostly women. And what was the other population?
Mostly women and queer folks, so
Okay.
LGBTQIA folks.
Okay. And is that because you find them more, are they drawn to you more, do you think, than, say, other groups? Or why do you think that is? Or was that a deliberate choice on your part to target women?
Yeah, I think that's a great question as well. I think it's a little bit of both. I think that part of my work has been identifying where I do the best work. And that has typically been with Black women specifically. And that's also because of my own experiences. I remember going to college and there was one Black therapist on the entire campus. And of course, of the 353 of us on the campus, we all wanted to see her. So that was actually part of why I ended up being a therapist at all. And I have worked in a college counseling center and felt that same energy and that same pressure. So I think part of it is that my skill set is unique, that much of what I have done, studied, researched, where I have spent my time really does tend to draw more Black and brown women and queer folks. But it's not all that we have, for sure. There are people who come to us who are looking for different ways of thinking, of healing, of knowing. We tend to get folks who have been therapists or already therapists who feel like other therapists that they've tried to work with are not necessarily as advanced or have the same level of maybe curiosity or expertise in other ways of healing and thinking. You know, something I hear a lot is I'm always told that I'm too self-aware. And then something like, you know, tarot, divination, accessing inner knowledge, like that feels like a next step in understanding the self. And also accessing the self beyond intellectualization. So I would say that feels probably why that population tends to be drawn, right? Like those are, you think about things like the strong Black woman trope. You think about the ways that populations who have been traditionally suppressed have to build this like very natural sense of resilience that is almost oppressive to the self, right? That it's not okay to be vulnerable. It's not okay to just trust what you think and feel. So coming to a practice where the goal is that we want to try to move you beyond that space seems to be what draws a lot of people in.
Well, I don't want to start any trouble, but I mean, do you have a sense that this is an arena that Black men seem to have more trouble accessing? And what can we do about that? Because you know, we have a lot of males in our community who really need to find a way to connect with themselves and their inner selves and what's going on inside of them. And I'm just wondering, like, what's your sense of that? Is this something that's a lot more challenging because of masculinity? And if so, what can we do about that?
Yeah. Um, that is such a good question. So I think in my experience and the work that I've done, I have found that breaking down and understanding of the patriarchy is where that has to start. And for Black men, especially, that tends to be rooted in this idea that I have to be very strong and that I can't necessarily access my emotions comfortably. I can't reveal this deeper inner kind of what feels like a vulnerable self. Because I have a job to do, right? Or I have to present myself in a certain way in society to stay safe and to stay alive. So a lot of the work that I have done with Black men has been around like, what is it that you wish you could do? When did that first start for you? And actually, when I talk about boundaried empathy, one of the things that I bring up specifically for men is that empathy is there as a concept, but it's been exiled for them a lot of the time. So it's very hard to access because there has been so much shame and so much conditioning around not being allowed to feel what might be perceived as feminine emotions. And I think sometimes the cards can be a little tricky because there are like symbols of femininity, masculinity, and I have to kind of talk about that and break that down in different ways. So I think what comes up for me is that I want to make sure that people feel comfortable having the conversation with me at all. And sometimes that is already a barrier to the work. Unfortunately, Black men in general, don't access therapy at the same level that women tend to. So I feel like it's about trying to think creatively around how to even kind of bring people into that fold and allow space for that level of like curiosity about the vulnerable self, because for very understandable reasons, right, that has been a very dangerous place to live for Black men especially. But so many of our traditional like deities, our spirituality have been Black men, right? Like Black men have been the seers, they've been the orators, they've been the story keepers. Like they're it would make so much sense, and it does make sense. I think that the constraints for Black men are just pretty significant in this day and age.
I know optimal psychology has been very effective with Black men. I think the minority behavioral health group, as well as I've forgotten, I'm slipping on the name of the other organization, Kindred Spirit
Kindred Spirit.
Behavioral. Yeah, have been very effective in terms of reaching men, and emphasis is always on going within and trying to tap into that divine connection, which allows freedom on so many levels, and empowerment and disempowerment of the lies that we've all been force fed.
Shy. I do want to acknowledge a comment we have in the chat on Instagram. Be More Natural says decolonizing gender, religion, food, everything is healing work. And I would have to agree. I think I'm lucky because I actually know some Black men tarot card readers. They happen to be both Pisces. So, we a little creative. But also, I love that you're applying that decolonizing framework to it, right? Because if you don't deconstruct systems of oppression like classism, sexism, gender roles and stuff like that, then we will continue to run into the same problems. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Colin, but I kind of want to hear from you, especially being another Black man on the call with regard to, how you're feeling about what we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been great to listen. So I appreciate the time to listen and think. And I was thinking earlier when, you raised the anecdote about your experience, I guess last week or this past weekend, with the intuition versus impulsivity debate. I was thinking about Dr. Myers's work with optimal psychology and this concept of diunal thinking, right? And I think white folks call it two sides of the same coin, right? You can have that both and everything doesn't have to be either or. And I appreciated what you all have been sharing about your thoughts about what may be going on with Black men. And we don't have enough time to get into all of my thoughts around that. So I'm actually just going to ask another question. And that is like, being in grad school, one of the things that, comes up is we learn a lot of different theories. And you mentioned a couple of the ones that we learn about: psychodynamic act, the projective stuff with respect to Rorschach, and this might be kind of a bit of a modification of some of that approach, if you will. But the other thing that we kind of that I learned, and I think we all learn once folks do become clinicians, is that when you learn something and then when you go to apply it, it's almost like that Mike Tyson quote: "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face," right? So, my question for you is, like, since you've started doing some of this work, clearly you've developed a certain level of confidence and self-assuredness around what you're doing with this. But I know, as with any approach, it ain't all sunshines and rainbows, right? Every once in a while, there's something that goes wrong with this, and so, or maybe you could say it's just 100%. Everybody just loves it. There's never ever any issue. Everybody just 0% depression, 0% anxiety after you do. If that's not the case, right? How have you gone about self-assessing, evaluating your own work and growing, especially because you're running your own practice, right? How have you gone about, what? That didn't really work so well for sis.
Yeah.
How have you figured out how to tweak this, perfect it, so that instead of a more perfect union, there's a more perfect approach to this integration in your work?
Yeah. Another great question. And I have to start with,
Well, there aren't any easy questions, are there?
no, I'm like, come on, can I get a yes or no? It's okay. I think what stands out for me when I think about that is how I decided to be a therapist in the first place. Obviously, we all learn about Freud, and we all learn about, how this field started, and being like, we're a mirror and we're not supposed to really be a part of the session. Like, our personhood is not supposed to be in the room. And I was never comfortable with that. So I made a decision early in my career, and that's with supervision, that's with really immersing myself in the work, that I would be as much of a human being and fully embodied myself as I could be. So that means that self-disclosure, that means that any type of disclosure shows up in my practice. And it has even before I got to this point. So for me, when I think about the ethics that I committed to for being in this field, it was that I need to be clear on my own work. I have been in therapy since I've been a therapist. Like, I have a regular space to talk through what comes up for me in my regular life and also in my therapy work. I have been a part of consultation groups. I am in the process of trying to bring together a group of particularly Black folks that want to do this kind of work, so that we can talk together about cases, about moments that didn't feel right, moments that weren't necessarily hitting what we were hoping for. But part of my practice is recognizing when I say something and my own gut starts to kind of alert, and I start to feel uncomfortable. And part of my practice is also bringing that up if I need to. So I have had sessions where I said something, I saw a reaction, or even just like in the kind of debriefing of that session for myself, I said, I think that was too soon. I think that was too harsh. I'm not sure. I think actually what I thought was understanding might have been dissociation from what I said. And I will come back in the next session and say, I've been thinking about this moment that happened in our session, and I want to hear how it landed for you, because I felt something. And I want to make sure that we're still working together and this still feels safe and this still makes sense for you. I have apologized to my clients. I have said, if you need time away, let's take time away. There are so many things that I do so regularly in my work that is about whether that made sense for them, and then checking to make sure, in no way do I think I am an expert on their experience. I barely think I'm an expert at this, and I've been doing it for a while. And I feel that discomfort, and I kind of connect that to my values, but also to social work and to our values, that the client's experience is always the priority. And if at any moment I feel like something I did or said might have prioritized my own experience more, I check and I make sure. I am a very collaborative therapist. When it makes sense to share things about my life, I do. I am not talking about myself. This is not my session. But if I can feel that need, then I'll bring it up. And those are some of the moments when I say, ooh, that was too much. I probably could have shared a little less. And then I make sure. So for me, it is a constant iterative process, therapy in general. And I've had clients who will, before I say anything, will say, that's not really how I feel, or I didn't like that, or I felt like you shut me down. And we have a conversation about it. And I say this often to my team and in general, right? We will all make mistakes. There is nothing we can do about that. We are different people. We have different experiences, lenses, all of those things. The power is not in the mistake. It's in the repair. So if you know how to repair, if you allow yourself to be humble to that process, any relationship will learn and grow from that, even if it's that the relationship ends. And I also see termination as a positive thing, right? Learning how to end positively, successfully, happily, even when it hurts, is a corrective emotional experience for so many of the people that we work with, right? They are used to explosion. They are used to emotional, psychological, maybe physical violence. So every part of the process to me is a training ground for them of understanding what is truly possible in healthy relationships, including that the expert makes mistakes. The
Right.
professional is still a person.
Mhm. I think that's so powerful what you just said, because I think we forget that we as therapists grow from the therapeutic relationships as well, because we put ourselves up on these pedestals, and then it causes our clients and the people we want to work with to put us on the pedestal as well, and not see us as fellow human beings in some sense. And we really are. And I think a lot of us forget that.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that that we're in this. This is a journey that we're in together, and we're going along this journey, and we're both learning and growing and developing out of the shared space that we have.
Such a rich realization that the purpose of negativity or mistakes in human experience is growth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a positive thing. So as long as that is the outcome, as you just described, um, it's all good. We've all grown. And I think, Dr. Jojo, there's a comment.
There's a couple. I know oh my gosh, we're right at the end, but there are a lot of questions from the audience. I don't know if I want to take at least one, and then a comment about how this was a rich and necessary conversation.
I think we should take at least one, if not two.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. So here's one question here. What do us in the private and public sector would need to do to centralize our locations? Black NGOs, brick and mortars, domestically to our liking as like-minded individuals. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's probably one we can put on for later. Can get something specific to our focus here.
Yes. Is there a resource list of therapists or a method to locate therapy that is open?
That is open. Oh,
I'm assuming that this person meant maybe to find modalities like Miss Revis's. So check out her website, Orange Tree Counseling. It is pinned here on our Instagram, and we'll share it after as well. ABSI also has a Black directory, or a directory of Black therapists that you can kind of go explore. Of course, we know it's not one size fits all, so you will have to ask questions and things of that nature.
Are there any questions specific to our topic that
Oh, I see one here. How have you best navigated conversations with those who may be spiritually hesitant to engage with the kinds of spiritual practices you recommended?
I just normalize the hesitance. It makes perfect sense that this doesn't feel 100% aligned, and it doesn't have to. It's about what feels natural to you. So we could also try it, and if you don't like it, then we won't do it again, right? I've had clients who we We tried it. They said, this was okay, but I don't think I'm there yet. And then a year later, they say, don't you pull tarot cards? So I think it's all about really assessing their comfort and making it very clear, like, this is your choice. It doesn't matter what I do. This will always be your choice.
That's right.
It's a developmental process, is it not, as we move through our cycles of life, of what feels right and what may feel right today or wrong today could very well be wonderful. I've certainly had that experience with people say, Dr. Myers, I read your book 20 years ago and I loved it, but I didn't understand it. Now I do. So you just have to keep that spirit. I don't see my clock. What time is it? We're out of time.
It's a
We are
little
out of
past.
time. But I did want to read this comment from Dr. Grayson. She says, such a rich and necessary conversation, which other folks have been sharing similar sentiments. I've always taken the route of humanizing therapy versus pathologizing clients as diagnostic labels, developing a partnership over a hierarchical relationship.
Absolutely. You've been a wonderful
You've
guest.
been wonderful, just wonderful.
I knew you would be, and I'm so happy you came. And you'll probably have to join us again at some point because there's some questions just about the processes of tarot. As we know, most tarot cards have a book or some kind of guide with them and all of that, but people who may want more detail. Anyway, audience, we're back, and we're so happy you joined us, and I know you enjoyed today's conversation. Look forward to seeing you next time. Peace and blessings.
Bye, y'all.